A roadblock in the middle of the 2003 season didn't stop the Miami Hurricanes from completing the Grand Slam of BCS Bowl games. After losing back-to-back games in the middle of last season to Virginia Tech and Tennessee, Miami rebounded nicely. They rolled off 3 straight victories to claim a Big East championship in their final year in the conference and beat arch-rival Florida State in the Orange Bowl. What fans waited 9 months for was delayed another few days. The Labor Day Monday night showdown was delayed 4 days because of Hurricane Francis rolling through the state of Florida. So instead of a Monday night contest, the lights in the Orange Bowl shined on Friday. A night game in the Orange Bowl isn't without drama, and this chapter of the Miami-Florida State rivalry was no different. In addition, the stakes might have been higher in this game than ever before. This was the first time Miami and Florida State had ever met as members of the same conference. Early on, it was apparent this would be a defensive struggle. The two teams forced one another to punt until the end of the first quarter when Florida State drew first blood. Brock Berlin fumbled inside Florida State territory, and the Seminoles recovered. They capitalized with a 45-yard field goal and went up 3-0. Turnovers turned out to be the story of the first half of the Hurricanes. In the second quarter, Miami looked to have a drive going when a pass from Brock Berlin to Roscoe Parrish went awry. The fumble was returned 61 yards for another Florida State score. The Seminoles were seemingly in control and took a 10-0 lead into the locker room.
It's wrong on offense. Hey, we're still right in this thing. We're still right in it. The thing people do sometimes, you won't panic. Don't panic. Let's keep punching. Stay in the process. Do the things your coaches do. Let's find a way. Let's find a way to win. Find a way to win. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
The Hurricanes knocked on the door a couple of times in the second half, but missed opportunities and turnovers halted their progress. The Seminoles maintained their shutout heading into the fourth quarter. Sensing the urgency of the situation, the Canes came out determined in the fourth quarter. Brock Berlin hooked up with Sonoris Moss for the first big play of the game to start the fourth, a 63-yard pass to the Florida State 24-yard line. This led to the Canes' first score, an 18-yard John Petty field goal. Miami was within a touchdown and would need its defense to be as brilliant as it had been the entire way. But after the Noles forced to punt on the ensuing possession, Florida State drove right back down the field with time winding down. With 4 minutes left, the game would come down to a field goal again. 3 points would all but ensure a victory for Florida State. But an emerging star had something to say about the 34-yard attempt. Devin Hester allowed the Canes another chance, but they'd be on life support as Berlin's next pass was intercepted by Florida State. Managed to hold Florida State once again, but there was only a minute 22 remaining. The fate of this game would rest on the arm of Brock Berlin. And like he did against Florida the previous season in the home opener, the senior brought the Canes back down the field. And with 30 seconds left, Sonoris Moss would once again electrify this Orange Bowl crowd. Overtime was Miami's. Florida State started off with the ball, but the Miami defense stood its ground and forced the third FSU turnover. Instead of settling for a field goal, Frank Gore decided to end the game with his legs in his first game since he went down with a season-ending injury the year before. Final score, Miami 16, Florida State 10. The Canes held Florida State to just 57 yards rushing, the lowest in the series since 1994. Miami had beaten Florida State for a 6th straight time and now had a stranglehold on the ACC after just the first game. As Miami got set to host Louisiana Tech in its second game, the Hurricanes wanted to be sure there wouldn't be a letdown after the dramatic win over Florida State. And instead of a letdown, a star was born in the Orange Bowl. Many people knew of Devin Hester's great talent, but few could expect what we saw on that hot September afternoon. First, it was a punt return in the second quarter. But he decided it wasn't enough and took another punt back even further. While the lasting memories of this game might be Devin Hester's blazing speed and ankle-breaking moves, the Miami offense came alive, something that was missed in the win over Florida State. Tyrone Moss broke open the scoring in the first with a 4-yard run. And just over 2 minutes later, he would find the end zone yet again. The two running backs were used sparingly. Moss finished with 69 yards, while Frank Gore ran 12 times for 64 yards and a touchdown. Miami cruised to its second victory of the season, 48-0, and still hadn't let up a defensive touchdown over the first 8 quarters of the season. Miami's first road test of the season would take them out of conference to Reliant Stadium in Houston for a nationally televised Thursday night game. The first of 2 Thursday night games the Canes would have this season. The Hurricanes entered the contest as 4-touchdown favorites and quickly showed why. Just a minute into the game, Miami held Houston to a 3-and-out. Then freshman Anthony Reddick blocked the Cougar punt into the end zone, where it was recovered by Tavares Gooden for a quick 7-0 Miami advantage. The play was a sign of things to come in the game, as the Canes flexed their muscles once more in the first quarter on Frank Gore's 4-yard touchdown run. And then again on the first play of the second quarter, with Tyrone Moss taking it in from a yard out. Miami took a 24-10 lead into the halftime locker room and didn't look back. Fans got treated to maybe the most exciting play of the season to date in the third quarter, when Reddick came up with his second big play of the game. He forces a Houston fumble, which is returned 52 yards by Baraka Atkins for another Miami touchdown. The score all but put this one away, as the Canes grabbed a 31-10 lead. Tyrone Moss added another touchdown late in the fourth quarter, and fourth-ranked Miami headed back east with a 3-0 record. Despite the perfect record, Miami's offense was far from perfect, as Brock Berlin and the Miami receivers struggled. Berlin completed just 13 passes for 99 yards and no touchdown passes. The offense would have to regroup for UM's first ACC road game at Georgia Tech in 9 days. Miami headed to Atlanta with a lot of question marks surrounding its offense. How would Brock Berlin respond to the pressure? Would the receivers put forth the effort many expected, including the coaching staff? And would we see the future of quarterback U on the field in the form of Kyle Wright? All these questions needed to be answered in a tough road environment as the Canes got set for yet another nationally televised game against Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets struck first on Chris Wood's 56-yard run all the way to Miami's 11-yard line. The Canes defense held, limiting Tech to just a field goal. The Canes offense struggled until later on in the first quarter, when Brock Berlin completed his first touchdown pass since the Louisiana Tech game, a 12-yard strike to Roscoe Parrish to put the Canes up 10-3. While Berlin put the Canes up with a touchdown pass, the second quarter gave us our first glimpse of redshirt freshman Kyle Wright. Wright was 4 of 6 for 24 yards passing in 2 series. Late in the second quarter, Miami's defense took over. A spectacular interception by Brandon Merriweather was one of 4 turnovers on the day, forced by the Canes defense. On UM's next play, Brock Berlin showed his arm strength, completing a 57-yard touchdown pass to freshman receiver Lance Leggett. Miami went up 20-3, which would be the halftime score. Miami got the ball to start the second half and picked up right where they left off on offense. Frank Gore rushed for 21 of his 115 yards on the first play from scrimmage. Berlin then went long again, hooking up with Roscoe Parrish for the second touchdown of the game. Berlin now had a career-high 3 touchdown passes to go along with 200 yards passing. After taking a 27-3 lead early in the second half, a defensive struggle ensued, and the score would remain the same by the end of the second half, as Miami improved to 4-0 on the season. The day wasn't without loss completely, however. Junior offensive lineman Eric Winston went down with a season-ending ACL injury in the second half, a key loss to the left side of Miami's offensive line.
Bless today, guys. We're a good football team today, and we got a chance to be a real good football team. Let's take that next step. Give yourself a hand, guys. Give yourself a hand.
Hey, listen up. When our man went down today, the rest of the season gonna go to him.
While the question marks at quarterback were put to rest, the Canes had 12 days to prepare for their next opponent, with the question marks surrounding their offensive line. Undefeated Louisville came to the Orange Bowl for another nationally televised Thursday night game. The Cardinals were one of the hottest teams in the country, entering the game at 4-0 and ranked 18th in the country. And they had beaten all 4 of their opponents by at least 28 points. The Canes struck first on a 9-yard pass from Brock Berlin to Greg Olson to put the Canes up 7-0. But Louisville's complex offensive sets baffled the Canes defense for the first time all season. The Cardinals marched the ball down the field with ease behind the arm of Stephon LaFours and tied the game up at 7. Miami's offense then sputtered with Berlin throwing an interception which led to a Louisville field goal and a 3-and-out, which Louisville took advantage of with its second touchdown. By the end of the first half, the Cardinals were red hot and took a 24-7 lead into the halftime locker room. Miami came into the second half determined, and it showed on the opening kickoff, which was returned by Devin Hester 100 yards for a touchdown, but called back because of a penalty. The penalty didn't take the wind out of the Hurricanes' sails, though, as Brock Berlin engineered his second touchdown drive of the game to cut the Louisville lead to 10 at 24-14. The lead would hold at 10, 31-21, entering the fourth quarter. Would there be more magic in the Orange Bowl like there was in Florida State? The fourth quarter was indeed one to remember for the Canes and all of South Florida. 2 John Petty field goals early in the quarter brought the Canes to within 4 points. Then, Miami came up with a stop on Louisville's next possession. What followed was one of the more memorable plays of the 2004 season. Miami had the lead 34-31 for the first time since 7-0 in the first quarter. But the Cardinals didn't go away. They went on a 4-minute drive capped by a 1-yard touchdown run to retake a 4-point lead with just 4 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. Another big kickoff return by Devin Hester gave the Canes good field position at their own 44-yard line. A big 26-yard pass from Berlin to Lance Leggett brought them on the doorstep of the goal line, but they needed a 4th down conversion to keep the drive alive deep in Louisville territory. Berlin found Darnell Jenkins, who touched the nose of the football just past the 1st down line. 2 plays later, Frank Gore had his second game-winning touchdown run of the season from a yard out to give the Canes the lead for good. A thrilling 41-38 win kept hopes for an unbeaten season alive and gave the Canes momentum heading into the NC State game the following week. Scoring 41 points as Miami did against Louisville would be no easy task against the top-ranked defense in the country, as Miami got set for another tough road test in North Carolina State. The first BCS rankings had Miami ranked number 2, behind only USC, as the Canes tried to stretch their undefeated streak.
I want you to remember, guys, remember who the University of Miami is. You are Miami. You are Miami. You are Miami. We're going to play Miami football tonight, aren't we? Flying around, having fun. You are the University of Miami. We're going to play Miami football. Make sure, stay in the process. There's going to be things happening, guys. Stay in the process.
They wasted no time doing so, as Devin Hester picked up right where he left off from the last game, returning the opening kickoff 100 yards for a touchdown. NC State used some trickery, an onside kick early on and a direct snap to running back T.A. McClendon, both of which contributed to an early 17-14 lead for NC State. But the second quarter saw Brock Berlin come alive. He closed out a drive, finding Sonoris Moss for a 10-yard touchdown. And from there, it was smooth sailing for the Hurricanes. Brock Berlin connected with his favorite target, Roscoe Parrish, for a touchdown the second time that night. A 27-yard pass to go along with the 3-yard pass in the first quarter. Miami took a 28-17 halftime lead and never looked back. Berlin found Quadrine Hill for a touchdown in the third quarter and then hooked up with freshman Lance Leggett in the fourth quarter. When the night was done, the Canes had registered 45 points, the third time this season they scored 40 points or more in a game. Brock Berlin had a new career high, 5 touchdown passes while completing 15 of 30 passes for 265 yards. The Canes were still undefeated and would be going right back to North Carolina the following week to face the Tar Heels. Miami's game in Chapel Hill wasn't expected to be close. The Hurricanes were big favorites, and most college football forecasters weren't talking about UNC being a threat to the Canes' undefeated season. But on this night in Chapel Hill, there would be no special teams heroics or any heroics, period. North Carolina came right out of the locker room and the Heels meant business, driving right down the field and scoring a touchdown 5 plays into this one. The Canes answered right back on their first drive, scoring in a mere 6 plays on a long touchdown pass from Brock Berlin to Lance Leggett. After a missed field goal attempt on North Carolina's ensuing possession, Miami seemed to take control of the game, going right back down the field and scoring another touchdown on Brock Berlin's 26-yard pass to Roscoe Parrish. The Canes took a 14-7 lead into the second quarter, but it was the Tar Heels who owned the Hurricanes in that second frame. 2 UNC touchdowns to close out the first half gave the home team a 21-14 lead heading into the locker room. Miami had showed resiliency all season long, coming from behind in games. The players would try to do it again in the second half. After both teams punted twice their first 2 possessions of the second half, UM finally broke the third quarter ice with a Tyrone Moss 8-yard touchdown run to tie the game at 21. The fourth quarter would be up for grabs, something Miami had become all too familiar with over the course of the season to date. UNC capitalized on a drive which had started in the third quarter, going 78 yards in 12 plays to go up 28-21. Miami would make one final charge as time was running down, and again turned to Devin Hester to provide more magic. He did with an 11-yard run into the end zone on a sweep play. Tied at 28, the game seemed destined for overtime, but the Heels would play a nasty trick on the Hurricanes one night before Halloween. North Carolina completed a series of passes and ran the clock all the way down. Connor Barth then sent the fans at Chapel Hill into a frenzy as he connected on a 42-yard field goal to give North Carolina one of its biggest wins in school history, 31-28. Hopes for a national championship were put to rest until 2005 after the loss to North Carolina. Still, Miami had the league title to play for a shot at the 5th straight BCS game come January. The Canes returned home for the first time since the Louisville game and welcomed ACC foe Clemson to the Orange Bowl. Miami looked to establish its home dominance right away. It took the Canes just 2 minutes to strike first, and they did so on Frank Gore's 23-yard run. After the initial score, a defensive struggle took place for most of the half. Both teams were only able to manage a field goal until the Hurricanes drove down the field at the end of the half. Frank Gore moved Miami down the field on a couple of runs. Add to that a spectacular catch by Akeem Jalla and another 14-yard run by Gore, and Miami had another touchdown by halftime and led Clemson 17-3. Despite not putting forth much offense, the Canes were confident heading into the second half, up by 2 touchdowns. The Tigers, however, were determined to show why they were able to win 3 straight games in the ACC. 7 minutes into the third quarter, Clemson finally got on the board with its first touchdown of the game on a 27-yard run. Both teams forced one another to punt until the fourth quarter. With Miami hanging on to a 7-point lead in the final quarter and unable to muster any offense, Clemson went for a fake field goal and converted a 6-yard first down run to set up first and goal. 2 plays later, the score was tied at 17, and Miami's 14-point halftime lead was gone. After tying the game, the Clemson defense forced Miami to punt 5 more times in the quarter. The Canes defense held its own as well, and the game went into overtime. Miami's last overtime win against Florida State would not be duplicated on this night. Clemson got the ball first and scored in 4 plays. Miami had one last chance, its possession in overtime, but Brock Berlin's pass to Lance Leggett was incomplete, and the Hurricanes had lost their second straight game, 24-17. If Miami wanted any shot at the ACC title, they would have to go to Charlottesville, Virginia, and knock off the ACC's first-place Cavaliers. The Canes looked to snap a 2-game losing as an underdog on the road against a team many picked to win the ACC. The two teams held each other scoreless until the very end of the first quarter, when Miami got deep in Virginia territory. Frank Gore then showed off one of the best touchdown runs of the season for the Canes. He finished the game with a season-high 199 yards rushing. Miami took a 7-0 lead into the second quarter, but Virginia answered back on its next possession, driving 65 yards in 10 plays for a touchdown to tie it. By the end of the second quarter, Talib Humphrey made his presence felt at the end of the Canes' drive. The senior fullback snatched a 3-yard pass from Brock Berlin and fell into the end zone as the Canes regained the lead 14-7. The second half would prove to be much more exciting than the first half. Virginia tied the game at 14 on a touchdown with 4 minutes left to go in the third quarter. John Petty then made up for an earlier miscue, knocking home a 43-yard field goal to give the Canes a 3-point advantage heading into the fourth quarter. Gutsy calls, an unsung hero, and a huge special teams play would define the fourth quarter for these Canes, who were desperate for a win in Virginia. First, the special teams hero Roscoe Parrish showed Devin Hester's not the only guy on the team capable of making huge plays on punt returns. Parrish proved to be just as lethal on a 62-yard punt return for a touchdown. The Canes had a 10-point lead, but the Cavaliers wouldn't die that easily at home. Sensing a momentum shift and being in danger of a 3-and-out on UM's next possession, the Canes needed a big play. On 3rd and 5, the unsung hero of the game, Talib Humphrey, came through yet again with another reception. This one was for 34 yards, all the way down to the UVA 31-yard line. As the Canes tried to run the clock down, they faced a 4th down with 58 seconds left. Instead of attempting a field goal, Larry Coker decided to go for it all. Brock Berlin knew exactly who to throw it to as Roscoe Parrish beat his man into the end zone to grab the 25-yard touchdown pass. The pass sealed the game and gave Miami hope for an ACC title. A big showdown now loomed between the Canes and Virginia Tech on December 4th. Before the Canes could worry about Virginia Tech, they would have to deal with Wake Forest in the Orange Bowl. If there was any question of a letdown, it was quickly put to rest. Miami took control of the game and took control early.
Let's make sure today now. Now, when are we going to start playing? First play, guys. We're not waiting until the middle of the first quarter. Start the second half. Let's make commitment to each other, guys. We're coming out fast, coming out fast, coming out fast, coming out fast. Guys, let's put the heat on these guys.
A career-best 361 yards passing from Brock Berlin ensured the Canes a chance to play for the ACC title in 2 weeks against the Hokies. Seven different Hurricanes would score touchdowns, including the first career touchdowns for freshmen Rashawn Jones and Andrew Johnson. Miami would go into bulldoze Wake Forest 52-7, and the December 4th matchup in the Orange Bowl was set. The ACC would have its first title game in December of 2005. However, the schedule makers must have seen something when they put Miami against Virginia Tech as the last regular season ACC game in 2004. The winner of this game would earn a spot in the Sugar Bowl against undefeated Auburn. For the Canes, they would be going for a 5th straight BCS game, while the Hokies looked to get back to the Sugar Bowl for the first time in 5 years. The two teams opened up the game trading touchdowns after a scoreless first quarter. Virginia Tech struck first on Brian Randall's 3-yard touchdown pass. Miami would answer 5 minutes later off a blocked punt. Four plays after the block, Tyrone Moss was in the end zone, and the game was tied at 7. A major defensive struggle took over the rest of the game. The two teams were able to add field goals over the next quarter and a half. Fans saw the game tied at 10 entering the 4th quarter. Miami's season and hopes of winning the ACC came down to 1 quarter. After the Hokies pinned the Canes deep in their own territory to force a punt, Tech ended up with great field position and needed just 1 play for its 2nd touchdown. Randall connected on a 39-yard touchdown pass to Eddie Royal. The score proved to be enough for a Virginia Tech victory. Brock Berlin's last pass of the game was knocked down, and Tech had its 2nd straight victory against Miami and was heading to the Sugar Bowl. As for the Canes, they would miss out on the BCS, but settle for the next best thing, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl.
I'll tell you what, give that bunch credit. They played their butt off. Let's give them some credit. They made some plays. They played a bunch of times we didn't make plays. Let's give them credit. Let's give them credit. played hard, always played well enough sometimes on defense to win the football. They made plays on offense, we didn't make the plays on offense. Guys, win as a team, lose as a team. It's always been that way. It's always that way. Now, we're going to have to beat men. We're going to have to beat men. It hurts. Of course it hurts. It ought to hurt.
Miami had played the University of Florida the previous 2 seasons and came away with a victory in both games, and also won the Florida Cup both seasons, beating the Gators and the Seminoles. None of the 3 Florida teams would have a chance to win the Florida Cup in 2004 until Miami was paired with Florida in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. A sold-out crowd packed the Georgia Dome to witness the battle for bragging rights in the Sunshine State. The game started physically as expected. The Gators had the chance to draw first blood, but as he did all season long, Devin Hester came through with yet another big play. Hester picked up a blocked field goal and sprinted down the sideline with ease for a 78-yard return. Hester had the Gators in his rearview mirror, and they would be there for the rest of the night playing catch-up. John Petty added a field goal in the second quarter before another spectacular play on special teams. Roscoe Parrish had been no stranger to big special teams plays this season, despite all of Devin Hester's accolades. With about 4 minutes left in the half, Parrish snuck his way past every Gator player as he returned a punt 72 yards for a touchdown. The second half was all academic for Miami. A dominating defensive performance left Florida and its quarterback, Chris Leak, baffled. The Canes registered 5 sacks and pressured Leak all night, forcing him to throw 2 interceptions. Brock Berlin didn't need a spectacular come-from-behind performance this night, as he needed the previous season against his former team. He threw for 171 yards and a touchdown pass to Ryan Moore in the third quarter to seal the game. Miami came away from the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl with a dominating 27-10 win, and the Florida Cup would stay in head coach Larry Coker's office. There were ups and downs during the 2004 Miami season. A great start with a win over Florida State, and a great ending beating the Gators. In between, there were many memorable plays and performances. Next year, Brock Berlin, Frank Gore, and Trell Roll, and Roscoe Parrish will all be gone. But a solid nucleus with emerging stars on both the offense and defense will put the Canes in position to compete for the national championship again next season.